Steve Jobs. A man who didn't just think differently, he lived differently.
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is. Your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much.
From revolutionizing personal computing to redefining the way we listen to music, Jobs shaped the modern world in ways that are still unfolding today. But what made him tick? Was he a genius visionary, a relentless perfectionist, or just a guy who really didn't want a couch? Walter Isaacson's Steve Jobs gives us a window into the weird, brilliant, and sometimes baffling life of Apple's co-founder. And today, we're diving into 6 unforgettable stories that reveal how Steve Jobs turned his quirks into his superpowers, and how those superpowers changed the world. Let's start with one of the weirdest and funniest stories about Steve Jobs. Back in the 1970s, he was working at Atari, one of the hottest tech companies at the time. But there was a small problem. Steve didn't like showering, he was on a strict fruit and veggie diet, and genuinely believed he didn't need deodorant or soap. His co-workers, not convinced. So, what did Atari do? They made him work the night shift, alone. But here's the kicker. While the smell might have driven his colleagues crazy, Jobs thrived in isolation. It gave him time to focus, experiment, and channel his creativity into the games that made Atari a household name. Even then, Jobs was proving that he didn't fit into a neat little box, and that was his greatest strength. Fast forward to the 1980s. Jobs is now leading the Macintosh team at Apple, and his obsession with perfection is in full force. One day, he walks into the design lab, takes one look at the circuit board, and flips out. Not because it doesn't work, it does, but because it's ugly. Jobs demanded that the inside of the computer be just as beautiful as the outside, even though most users would never see it. His team thought he was crazy, but Jobs wouldn't back down. His philosophy was simple: everything matters. That relentless attention to detail made the Macintosh a game changer, not just in function, but in form. At the height of his success, Jobs was living in a massive, minimalist house with almost no furniture, no couches, no chairs, nothing. Why? Because Jobs refused to buy anything until he found the perfect pieces. To him, even furniture needed to have meaning, beauty, and purpose. It's a little quirky, sure, but it also shows how deeply he valued design. That same philosophy shaped Apple's products, where every curve, button, and material was meticulously chosen to create an experience, not just a product. Then there's the infamous reality distortion field. Jobs had this Jedi-like ability to convince people to believe the impossible, and it worked. Take the time he visited Xerox PARC in 1979. Engineers there had developed a revolutionary graphical user interface, the desktop metaphor, but they didn't see its full potential. Jobs. He instantly realized this was the future of computing. When Apple's engineers told him it would take years to replicate, he turned on the charm and said, "You have 2 weeks." They pulled it off. The result? The Macintosh. A computer so intuitive that it made technology accessible to the masses. Jobs didn't just distort reality, he reshaped it. Here's a fun one. For years, Jobs drove a silver Mercedes SL 55 AMG with no license plate. How did he get away with it? He discovered a loophole in California law that allowed new cars to go 6 months without plates. So every 6 months, he'd lease a brand new car. Why? Maybe he liked keeping people guessing, or maybe he just enjoyed bending the rules without actually breaking them. It's a small detail, but it speaks to Jobs' personality. He always found a way to challenge conventions, whether it was with a car or a computer. Finally, let's talk about Jobs' need for control. Whether it was designing the first iPod or the layout of Apple stores, he had to oversee everything. Take the iPod, for example. Jobs demanded a click wheel that was simple, elegant, and intuitive. When engineers struggled to make it work, he locked them in a room until they figured it out. The result? A device so revolutionary that it redefined how we listen to music. Jobs wasn't just creating products, he was creating experiences. His lesson? True innovation happens when you own the process and refuse to compromise. Steve Jobs wasn't perfect. He could be demanding, eccentric, and downright impossible to work with, but he was also a visionary who turned his quirks into strengths and changed the world in the process. From the first Macintosh to the iPhone in your hand, his legacy lives on in the tools we use every day, and in the way we think about design, technology, and innovation. Want more stories about the great minds who shaped the world? Subscribe now and never miss a new deep dive into the disruptors, dreamers, and the people who dared to change everything.